coming up on today's Locked On Dodgers, Dodgers pick up 3 players in the minor league version of the Rule 5 draft. We'll get into a couple questions about coaching and talk about a little bit about Bob Geren and the Mets. So that's what's on tap. So make sure to keep it Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. I'm Vince Samperio, Chevezrian Fiends. That's Jeff Snider of Baseball Essential. And we are Locked On Dodgers. We are going to get into some actual Dodger news today. The Dodgers picked up 3 players in the minor league side of the Rule 5 draft. We're going to talk a little bit about Gavin Lux and his role moving forward, and then get into a couple questions about coaching and talk a little bit about Bob Geren meeting with the Mets for their managerial position. That's what's on tap for today. Before we get into it, just want to thank you and remind you to make Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. We're here and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. All right, Jeff. So minor league transactions can still happen. Something we talked about last week when we did a little bit of primer on the lockout. And the minor league Rule 5 draft still happened, and the Dodgers actually picked up some interesting names, a couple guys that have had major league time, and it's a little bit of catcher's depth maybe. They picked up, I don't know, Kakai or Kiki Rios, not sure exactly how to say it, a catcher who's probably going to be minor league depth, 24-year-old. They picked up Carson Fulmer, who was a former first-round pick back in 2015, who's kicked it around the major leagues the last few years. And John Duplantier, I'm assuming you pronounce it, who they've seen. I want to say they've seen them with the D-backs and the last couple or 2 of the last 3 years. He's more of a starting pitcher. Carson Fulmer has been more of a reliever, although he has started in the past. And then, like I said, Kiki Rios, catcher. But yeah, Jeff, some interesting names for sure. At least a name that we've heard of before, and actually 2 names we've heard of before, which is pretty interesting for our minor league side Rule 5 draft.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just because it's the only thing happening in baseball right now, or if it is because the Dodgers did take 2 pretty big-ish names, at least by the standards of the minor league Rule 5, like you said. Carson Fulmer is really interesting. He's now the 4th pitcher who was drafted in the first round of the 2015 draft to be in the Dodgers organization. They already had Walker Buehler and Phil Bickford, and they just recently signed Beau Burrows. Now they had Carson Fulmer. So Fulmer was the 8th pick. Bickford was the 18th. Burrows was the 22nd, and Buehler was the 24th. The Dodgers also drafted Kyle Funkhauser in that round, but didn't sign him. So, they're just loading up on pitchers from round, and Buehler and Bickford have both turned out pretty well. We'll see what happens with Burrows, and now they're moving out of the B's and into the F's. Carson Fulmer, he was actually a teammate of Walker Buehler at Vanderbilt, and so it's Carson Fulmer is really intriguing, having been an 8th overall pick. Obviously, there's some talent there, and he and Duplantier are both 27 years old. Fulmer is going to be 28 in a couple days. But 28 is still relatively young. There's no reason that I know of to think that he doesn't still have at least some of that potential that caused him to be a first-round draft pick. And the Dodgers have had pretty good luck with reclamation projects. And same with Duplantier. I remember watching him pitch with the D-backs, and his stuff, it was really, really good. And so, I think there's a chance that both of these guys could be the kind of guys that, they strike me as the kind of guys who the Dodgers would go after because of their luck with turning pitchers into decent major league parts. And so high upside on both of those guys, and obviously zero risk. It cost them like $24,000. So the Dodgers paid $48,000 to the Giants and the Reds, I guess is probably where Fulmer came from, for these 2 guys. And that's pocket change. And now they have them in the system, and we'll see what happens. But I have to think that it could be okay.
Yeah, both guys. Obviously, if you've been in major leagues before, you have the stuff at least to get there. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be good enough to stay there. Which, you know, these guys have had issues not with staying in the majors necessarily, but with being successful in the major leagues. Interesting. You go to their baseball salon page and look. Duplantier doesn't have too much that's in the high percentile. He doesn't throw that hard. He throws 91.2 average on the fastball last year, but he does throw a sinker at 91. So right away, you look at a guy like Duplantier. He didn't pitch much last year, but he did throw a four-seam sinker, slider, curveball, and changeup. That's 5 pitches. I don't think, depending what the Dodgers have in store for him, if they think they can get him to maybe cut down on those pitches, but have 3 kind of good pitches rather than 5 maybe mediocre pitches, that might be something they push down on. It also might just be a matter of depth. They're going to probably have to get Pepio and Andre Jackson some innings in the major leagues, especially if they don't, depending what they do the rest of this offseason, they need guys to kind of fill roles in AAA, and that could possibly be there. But as we've seen from years past, guys that end up pitching in AAA will probably end up finding themselves in the majors at some point. Carson Fulmer is also a little bit interesting. Former first-round pick, it's got to mean that there's some kind of stuff there. He actually has a pretty high percentage, up there percentile-wise in terms of fastball spin. Throws mid-90s, so maybe they'll work out a couple things there. A lot of things with the Dodgers when they do have these projects or guys that they think that maybe they can help out. It's usually that they haven't seen something and either changing sequencing or, like I said, type of pitches that they predominantly use. And we'll just have to see if it's more than minor league depth, or they actually have maybe some thoughts about these guys and some actual plans to maybe have them help this year in the majors.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the one game that Duplantier pitched against the Dodgers in 2019. I actually remember the game. It's the game the Dodgers lost in extra innings to the D-backs. But Duplantier gave up a 2-run homer to Will Smith, and other than that, he was pretty darn good. 7 strikeouts in 5 innings, and it's definitely people listening to this might have an opinion on what it means for an untested rookie to have a good game against the Dodgers, because it seems like a lot of them do that, but. So maybe I'm biased by seeing him pitch really well the only time he pitched against the Dodgers. But yeah, I am all about taking a risk on these guys with high upside. And as for Rios, I really do think, like you said, just catching depth. It's hard to, right now the Dodgers only have 2 catchers on their 40-man roster, and that's Smith and Barnes, and so. They need somebody who, if Austin Barnes gets hurt, somebody needs to be the backup catcher. And heaven forbid, if Will Smith gets hurt, somebody needs to back up Austin Barnes, which is a sad sentence to say out loud. And Kike Rios is, almost Kike Hernandez, almost Edwin Rios, at least in the name department. And hasn't shown the bat. It's kind of funny, like his minor league career, he's had some good offensive seasons, but all of them came when he was basically old for his level. He hit really well in rookie ball for the Brewers in 2018, but he was 21 years old, and 21 years old in rookie ball is very old. And then he hit really well in high A, or hit pretty well in high A last year, but he was 24, and 24 in high A is about a year and a half older than the league average. And so, he hasn't ever really shown the ability to hit when he's facing people his own age. But from what I've read, he's a very good defensive catcher. And, there's worse things. The Dodgers have gotten by in the past with an occasional terrible hitting catcher who can play good defense. And if he, if Austin Barnes gets hurt, that's basically what he's replacing. So,
Yeah, speaking of catchers, I don't know, Tim Fedorovich did announce his retirement from baseball, and he actually took a job as a AAA manager for the Tacoma Rainiers. So congrats to him. He never came back to the Dodgers after he participated in the Olympics, so he never really was part of the Dodgers last year, but he's been part of the Dodgers before. So
yeah, good for him.
We're gonna talk about Gavin Lux, stemming from a question that we got from a listener. But before, let's talk about BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered all season long with more props, more odds, and more lines than ever before. And they got everything you need for football season, and it remains your number 1 spot for all sports action this season. So go make some money at BetOnline. And right now, if you sign up today at BetOnline, You get a 50% welcome bonus on after your first deposit with the promo code Locked On. So that's 50% on top of what you make on your first deposit with the promo code Locked On. Go take advantage of that today. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Stance socks. I don't know if you guys have ever used Stance socks or purchased any Stance socks, but I have a few pairs of Stance socks, and they are really comfortable. It's super soft, really well made. It's the stuff the players wear on the field. I personally have the ones with the 3 palm trees on them that the players use, and they're super dope socks that people always ask me where I got them. Stance socks is where you can find them, assuming they have them. But either way, Stance socks are they're really great. And some of these designs they don't just have sports. They can go get Dodger socks. You can go get other stuff, but they got Star Wars, The Office, Harry Potter, Disney, Marvel, pretty much anything you might like. They can have Stance socks on their site. So right now, Stance believes that the perfect fit matters more than fitting in, that those who feel good do good. Go see for yourself. Register for an account at stance.com and get 15% off your first purchase. Use promo code Locked On at checkout to apply. That's 15% off with the promo code Locked On at Stance.com. Enjoy the color and comfort of a life less ordinary with Stance. Okay, we're back, and we had a question from a listener that pertained to Gavin Lux, and Gavin Lux is probably one of the most interesting Dodgers to talk about this offseason. The question came from at SD_Dodger Dave. He asked, has Lux made the transition to full-time MLBer with an expected annual B WAR above 3? We know from years past that Jeff Snider is a big fan of Gavin Lux. I've always been a little less excited, but always hopeful that he can be that guy. And yeah, Jeff, it's right now, you would imagine Gavin Lux slots it to the starting second baseman role. Is this the year he maybe takes advantage of that?
I think it is. I also thought last year was going to be, and I still think if he hadn't got hurt, it might have been. He had some slumps, but he had a couple really good stretches, including at the end of the season. At the end of the year, it looked like he was putting it together. And obviously, you got to show you can do that over a full season. But I mean, overall last year, he had, I think everybody would call it an up and down season, and yet he had 1.6 WAR in 381 plate appearances, which is basically about a 3 WAR season, which is what the question said, over the course of a full season. So if he can stay healthy, and there's no reason to think he can't, he hasn't been injury prone throughout his career. He had some bad injury luck this year, but if he can be healthy, the only real question mark for me is he going to hit left-handed pitching? And, he did okay at times this year against left-handed pitching. Wasn't great. And if not, then, he's going to be a platoon player. He's still being the left-handed part of a platoon. You still get the bulk of the at-bats. But that's the big question. When Gavin Lux had his great season in the minor leagues, he hit lefties really well. And so far in the majors, he hasn't. But, I'm not ready to give up on Lux as a hitter against left-handed pitching. He's an excellent hitter. He hits the ball hard, and he's a great athlete. And so he's going to be, if he does, if the Dodgers do sign somebody else to bump him out of the starting second baseman role, I think Lux slots in great as a utility guy, a super utility guy, even with Chris Taylor coming back, filling that kind of role. He's the best athlete on the team, probably. He played pretty well in the outfield. I know there was one big noticeable gaffe in the postseason that I think soured a lot of people on the Gavin Lux to center field experiment. But it's not like he was Jock Peterson at first base, Gavin Lux has what it takes to play the outfield. And if he can do that, if he can play shortstop and second and the outfield positions, he's going to be very valuable. And the question will be, how many plate appearances is he going to get? Because and that'll depend on, can he hit left-handed pitching?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, Gavin Lux is interesting in the fact, can he be that guy? Also interesting in the fact of, if the Dodgers do end up signing a big-time free agent, Freddie Freeman, I guess, Carlos Correa has been one of the rumors that's still, I guess, out there technically. does he become trade bait for the starting pitching that they need? And, the hot last month of the season, he's, I wouldn't say his value is the highest it's ever been because he was the number one prospect in the Dodgers farm system before. And that was before they knew that, he might not be that guy in the major leagues. But I still think he has high value. And, definitely a team like the A's and Reds who are looking to deal some of their players. A guy like Lux fits right in. He's they'd have him around for 4 or 5 years, however much time he's accumulated, or how the new CBA works. And he's a guy that would be there right now, an everyday player, and probably still be an everyday player by the time they might actually start getting good. So it's a matter of how the Dodgers feel about Lux, how they feel about their situation. It's a matter of can they get Freddie Freeman? If they can get Freddie Freeman, Muncy moves over to second or maybe even third if they want to get JT off his feet if there's the DH. There's a lot of moving parts. And, yeah, if we get the Lux that we saw in September, then, yeah, he's a guy that can play every day at second base or at least the majority of the time. But also if he's that guy, like I said, he has more value for the Dodgers to trade. And, at this point with the way the team is and the window that's open, that might be something they do as well.
Yeah, and for me, the question of Gavin Lux as trade bait really boils down to, is another team willing to give proper value for him? Because the Dodgers are not a sell low kind of team. And if you just look at Lux's raw numbers last year, I think it would be kind of a sell low situation. And so they'd have to get, like you said, if they're using him in a deal to get a really good starting pitcher, I could see that happening. But it would depend on the Reds or A's or whoever it is valuing him the way the Dodgers value him, kind of valuing the potential at least as much as the what he's done in the big leagues, because he is only still a couple years removed from being the best player in the minor leagues, and he's definitely shown flashes of that in the big leagues. And so that basically for me, that's why it's kind of hard to picture him getting traded, is because I don't know for sure that another team would give that top value for him. And I have a hard time seeing Andrew Friedman selling low on him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some teams it just depends, I guess, what part of the season you want to look at. If you look at the season as a whole, obviously it's, a little bit left to be desired. If you look at the last part of the season, like, oh, that's a guy who could be, but it might just be a hot month, or it might be, something that's more legit. I think the fact that he does have value now, can play both spots up the middle, that he can play outfield, that definitely helps out. But we'll see what happens. I think the Dodgers would have enough, and obviously with potential being the bigger thing for trades, and especially with teams that are looking to trade right now, they might be able to get away with using some of the other players, keeping Lux around, because the Dodgers still need a strong bench all around. They're getting Edwin Rios back. Lux and or Taylor will either be, somebody, one of them, or Lux, Taylor, Pollock, one of them coming off the bench at any point. But they still need more depth. As we saw from last year, I don't expect or want to see Steven Souza or Andy Burns type players getting some of the biggest at-bats in the playoffs. So we'll see what happens all around. But, yeah, I think Lux is, at the very least, he's a guy that can hang around the majors for a few years, just with what he's shown so far and what his floor is.
Yeah, absolutely. And that athleticism is going to take him far. And so, yeah, he's even if he turns into a defensive specialist, or a super platoon guy, even if the bat never does get to where we hoped it might be, yeah, he's definitely a guy who could play 12 or 13 years in the big leagues just based on his athleticism.
Yep. All right, let's talk about Bob Geren. But first, want to remind you to make Locked On Dodgers your first listen every morning. We are here every weekday morning. We're available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. So check us out. Tell your friends, family, and everybody else to check us out. We would appreciate it. All right, Bob Geren, Dodgers bench coach. He had a meeting with the Mets for their managerial position. It would appear that the Mets are leaning toward Buck Showalter being that guy for their managerial position. But either way, Bob Geren's a guy that we've all, if you're on Twitter, you kind of know, Bob, he knows the rules. He's done a few things here in years past that have helped the Dodgers. But I guess for those that maybe don't know, bench coach, what does he do? What is important about it? Is it, is losing Bob Geren would that be a problem for the Dodgers, or is it just a matter of they'll find the next guy to kind of step into that role? What do you think, Jeff? Or you have probably a knowledge of everything I just asked.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it would be a problem. I do think it would be rough. I think Bob Geren is a very good bench coach. I think he's very valuable in that role. And I think Dave Roberts is a manager who benefits from having a really good bench coach, that every manager does. But for a guy like Dave Roberts, who his best skill, his number one skill as a manager is managing people. And, that what for Dave Roberts to be at his best as a manager, he needs Bob Geren and Mark Pryor in his ear, helping with the other parts of the game. Not that Dave Roberts doesn't know how to do those parts, but it's just so that he doesn't have to think about them. The way managing is these days in the big leagues, no manager is expected to be an expert on every part of the game at any given time. And it's the same with Dave Roberts. And so having Bob Geren there just to take some of that off his plate, I don't know how they distribute the responsibilities. Obviously, Bob Geren is always watching for obscure rules violations and is ready to come through. But I think that's probably more a case of he just knows the rules really well. And so he sees them. I don't think he's on the lookout for them. He sees, I don't know about that. Because I'm the same way. I'm a rule book nerd, and I'll be watching a game and things just jump out at you sometimes when it's something you happen to know. But whatever their distribution of responsibilities is, I think Bob Geren is a very good bench coach. And so, yeah, it would be a bummer if he left. I think he is replaceable. That for me, the big question is, and I don't know how to say this without sounding rude to Bob Geren. Bob Geren has been a major league manager already, and his teams were not very good. And, his best season as a manager, his team went 81-81. And so I get that the Mets are interviewing a bunch of people. But for me, Bob Geren has found his role. He is a bench coach. He thrives in that role. And I don't see why he would want to leave it, especially to go to a train wreck like the Mets. And I don't really see why a train wreck like the Mets would think Bob Geren, who has 5 years of managerial experience and a 470 winning percentage, he's the guy who's going to take us to the promised land. At least Buck Showalter, another old white dude, at least he has a history of having winning teams. And so, yeah, I think Bob Geren is a bench coach, and I think he should be a bench coach. And he's a guy who should settle into that role, whether it's with the Dodgers or somebody else, but he needs to be a bench coach until he's ready to retire, because that's what he is very, very good at.
Yeah. All right. We had one more question kind of about coaching. I think you had it in your DMs, Jeff. So
yeah, our buddy Doug Reynolds at CRCL 805 asked a question, and something we've probably all kind of noticed. It basically, I'm going to paraphrase, it's kind of long, but basically when the Dodgers have a runner on first base, we will often see Clayton McCullough whispering in their ear. And what it looks like, at least to Doug, and to some of us, it looks like he's actually getting the signs from Dino Abel and whispering it in their ear. And Doug said, he said that it looks like Dino Abel gets the sign for the dugout, then relays the sign to McCullough, who then whispers into the ear of the base runner on first base. Can you explain this a little more in detail on an upcoming podcast? I assume it's just to add a few layers of complexity to the signs that are given, but it just seems so strange with McCullough at first base whispering into the ear of our base runner as if they're in Little League or something. Can a professional ball player read a sign themselves? And I have thoughts. You have thoughts on this, Vince?
Yeah. First thought is we don't know what he's saying to them. They could, unless you specifically have seen the players not looking at whatever sign's been given and then getting told. The first base coach has a few different things there. They're, clocking the catcher, they're the pitcher to home plate more so than the catcher to second. But, pitcher to home plate, he might know a tell, or he might have, some kind of insight into, hey, if he does this, he's probably not going to throw over. Or if he's never, they have enough data to where he's never thrown over in a 2-1 count ever in his life. That might be a piece of data that they know when somebody comes, and if it's 2-1 count and he whispers in his ear, hey, he's, remember, he's never, thrown over on 2-1 count. So whatever the case is, whatever he's telling them, we don't know. It could just be like, hey, I'm talking to you and the sign's getting given right now, so pay attention. Or the sign's coming from somewhere else, we don't know. Or they might have, whatever it is, whatever the case is, I'm sure they're a lot smarter than what it's kind of boiled down to of he's telling them exactly what to do. I would imagine that's not what's happening. And if it is, it hasn't really worked because the Dodgers, when they did steal bases last year, were pretty decent at it, especially in the postseason.
Yeah, I am 1,000% sure that he is not whispering the signs into their ears. And one piece of evidence is something you kind of hinted at there at the end. The Dodgers almost never sacrifice bunt and they almost never steal. And yet he's whispering in their ears almost every time. And so, he's not going to be whispering, hey, there's no sign. Oh, that sounded like Locked On Sexy Dodgers. Whatever he's whispering, it's not the signs. And I do think, what you said is, there's so much data that the teams have, and Clayton McCullough's job is to know that data. And part of the separation of duties we were talking about with Geren extends to the players too. Mookie Betts isn't expected to know every pitcher's delivery time. And that's really important information for a base runner. And we've heard several times there are several Dodger base runners who have a green light. The Dodgers don't give many steal signs. They have, Mookie and Chris Taylor and Bellinger and some of these guys, and Trey Turner, obviously, guys who are fast and therefore have a green light. And so I think a lot of it is McCullough saying, hey, I've been timing him here from the stretch, or saying this is his first time in the stretch today. So we don't have a time on him. I'm going to get times over the next couple pitches. We're going to, he'll say, oh, he's got a high leg kick and a slide step. There's so many things that it's McCullough's job to know about the opposing pitchers. And so you're just doing that. And so, yeah, when I'm coaching first base for my son's little league team, yeah, most of the time what I'm whispering is, hey, dummy, were you watching when your coach just gave you a steal sign? Okay, that means you're going to steal. Hey, dummy, listen to me. You're stealing. Clayton McCullough doesn't have to do that with Major League Baseball players. And so, yeah, it's not that. It is, there's so much data that, Clayton McCullough, that's his job. It's his only job. What else does a first base coach do? That's not, doesn't even have to know signs, doesn't have to, Dino Ebel is also the fielding and positioning coach. Clayton McCullough's real one job is to know this data on the pitchers and be able to whisper it into base runners' ears. And so I think that's what he's doing. Like you said, Vince, I'd love to have him mic'd up, and even if they didn't do it until later, but the fact is, a lot of that, not the secret information, but I think part of the appeal of it is the other team doesn't know exactly what he was whispering either. And sometimes it probably is, hey, I'm whispering something just so that we might be doing something here. We want the pitcher to be paying attention to you. And so I'm going to whisper to you. And maybe that's all it is. But a lot of the time, I think there's plenty of data that the base runners need to know, or at least might need to know.
Yeah. One other thing is you see when the pitchers talk to the catchers, their mouths are covered. That's stuff that they don't want to be seen or picked up on. You would think if McCullough was going to be telling these guys, hey, you're going to steal, they would at least cover their mouths, but that's not something that happens either. So that's probably why it's just data or just, hey, what's up? I mean, if you've seen Bull Durham, that the scene on the mound when they're talking about the wedding gift, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that coaches talk about that might not be pertaining to the game, but they want to make it look like it's pertaining to the game. So,
yeah, absolutely.
All right, that's all we had on tap for today. Jeff, you got anything else you want to add before we head out?
No, I think that's it. I'm going to be solo tomorrow because what concert are you going to, Vince?
Kanye West and Drake.
Nice. I've heard of both of those people. I might even recognize some of their music, possibly, but I am an old white man, so maybe not. Yeah, so I'll be solo tomorrow because Vince will be off having fun with Kanye West and Drake. Those guys, they hated each other for a while, didn't they?
Yes, they recently squashed a beef, and now
that's
they're performing
fun
together.
Huh. Well, that's exciting. I hope you get to be in a group hug with them or something.
That'd be cool. That'd be a flex on the gram for sure. All right, that's gonna do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for being part of the Locked On Dodgers familia. Thank you for making us your first listen every single weekday morning, or maybe some weekend mornings if you miss. Remember, we are here every weekday morning, Monday through Friday. That's 5 episodes a week. If you're not listening to 5 episodes a week, we would request that you start getting that number closer to 5 rather than closer to 1. We would also request that you tell your friends and family about us and other people in your life, coworkers, whoever it is. We're talking Dodgers for the most part in an off season of a lockout. So what else can you really ask for? You need something to fill your baseball fix. We're here for you. We are available wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. You can find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snydog, and I'm at Vince Samperio. You can always DM any of those accounts for any questions, comments, concerns, or you can send them via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail or text at 323-863-LOCK. That's 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car or if you're at home. Your smart device play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.